Hi everyone, this is Miss Moriarty and I'm here to discuss with us topic 7.4, which is going to be all about atmospheric carbon dioxide as well as particulates. So we've been talking a lot about the criteria air pollutants that we know that the EPA has set standards for, and we know that a part of those criteria air pollutants is not necessarily carbon dioxide, because we know that CO2 doesn't directly impact human health. However, there can be indirect effects as it relates to things like climate change and global warming. But it's important to note some of the, however, sources of carbon dioxide, since we know it can have indirect impacts. So some sources of carbon dioxide can be through cellular respiration of living organisms, such as plants as well as animals, right? They're going to naturally release carbon dioxide. However, right, through the carbon cycle, we know that those plants will then take in a lot of whatever that CO2 is in the atmosphere, fix that carbon, and create glucose through photosynthesis. So that would be a natural cycle of where we see carbon dioxide being released and then taken back in. Another source of carbon dioxide found within our atmosphere can be through aerobic decomposition. So this would be through the breakdown of organic matter, typically by bacteria that is going to be found within the soil. And this, since we say it's aerobic, is going to be in the presence of oxygen. So when this happens in the presence of oxygen, that bacteria naturally release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, and that CO2 can then be naturally cycled back through living things via photosynthesis once again. Now, when looking at particulate matter specifically, we know that they can come from a variety of human sources, but they can also come from natural sources too. So things like sea salt, pollen, ash from a forest fire or a volcanic eruption can all produce particulate matter in the local area. We can see dust, especially if an area is maybe experiencing some desertification amongst the soil. So now it's lacks a lot of moisture. A lot of that soil can be in the form of dust and kind of blow to different areas. This can lead to, let's say, like a haze in that area, which then scatters sunlight, reduces visibility for the day. In looking at particulate matter very specifically, we have now gone over the fact that there are two types of particulate matter 10 and particulate matter 2.5. The difference between the two is going to be their sizes. PM10 is going to be a little less than 10 micrometers in size, so it's actually a little larger than the 2.5 micrometers. PM10 can be in the form of particles, can be in the form of droplets. Things like dust, pollen, ash, and even mold spores can all fall under the category of particulates. So, for example, today when we went around the school and we took pictures of areas that might be sources of indoor pollution, if you happen to stumble upon things like dust, pollen, or mold, those all can be examples of particulate matter 10. Now, our bodies have a way to kind of filter out those types of particulates, and that would be through the nose hairs within our nostrils, as well as in our throats, the trachea and the cilia. All have the ability to kind of help to filter those pollutants, but we may not capture all of them, and so when we inhale something such as pollen, ash, mold, it can be considered an irritant and it can inflame our respiratory tract. Now, PM 2.5, these are going to be much smaller in size. These tend to be particles that come from combustion, specifically vehicles, and much, much smaller dust particles. They take more likely to travel deep into the lungs because of their much smaller size, and so exposure, especially long exposure, to particulate matter 2.5 is usually associated with recurrent bronchitis and an increase in risk of developing lung cancer. Okay, so here is our practice FRQ for 7.4. Students want to conduct an experiment to determine how road construction impacts the amount of PM in the air. They spread Vaseline onto the bottom of 6 petri dishes and place them at various distances from a road construction site and an existing road. The first 3 dishes were placed at 50, 100, and 200 yards from the road construction site, while the second group of dishes were placed 50, 100, and 200 yards from an active road, not under construction. Here you have to identify the control group that would be used in this experiment, and identify the likely dependent variable the students are measuring and describe how they can measure this variable. And hint, 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 guys, this is pretty much what we're doing for our particulate matter lab tomorrow. So take a moment, pause this video, answer this in the Edpuzzle, and you can also answer it in your Practice FRQ journal in your notes. Okay, so some of the answers for this Practice FRQ. Based upon these students' designed experiment, their control group would most likely be Petri dishes placed at distances from the active road, not necessarily under construction, since they were trying to figure out, does construction produce particulates? The dependent variable would be the amount of particulates collected in the Petri dishes. To measure this variable, students can maybe magnify the device order to count the number of particulates found in each Petri dish, maybe by using maybe a microscope, a stereoscope, maybe they use a magnifying glass of some sorts to kind of look at the particulates at a much larger view and then count the number of particulates that they see. Alright everyone, that's it for our video on 7.4, and be ready to do our particulates lab tomorrow.